Hello, everybody. Back again. I finished my Nintendo collection actually a day or two ago, where I reviewed 170 Nintendo games, talking about my memories of stuff like that, talking about what I thought was interesting about the game, my memories that I had playing it, or kind of revealing maybe the fact that I haven't, because I will totally admit I have a video game backlog. So before I start talking about my Sega Genesis collection here, I just want to give another big shout out to at Classic Gaming Quarterly. Again, he's really kind of the person that got me started. In fact, especially for this stream, maybe even more than, well, my Nintendo collection certainly has grown since I started watching his channel a couple of years ago and becoming a Discord or a Patreon supporter and whatnot. My Sega Genesis collection really was almost non-existent, and his passion for the Sega Genesis is something to behold, and it really got me really kind of rediscovering a system that I barely knew back when it was around, partly because I just didn't play it very much. I was more of a Super Nintendo kid, admittedly, and now I'm really discovering just how awesome that console is and how fantastic the library is. So thanks a lot, Chris. You've really inspired me. So what we're going to look at is my loose carts. I have a whole bunch of complete in box, or at least in-boxed Sega Genesis games, which we'll probably do for another day. But I do also have lots of loose carts around, carts that I picked up as a kid, or maybe I had a box for, and I threw those boxes away, which of course is not a really good idea from a collector standpoint. So they're not really in any specific order, so they'll be kind of random a little bit more than maybe what my Nintendo games were. But well, here we go. So first game that we have here is Bill Walsh. Bill Walsh's college football. And for myself, as a person who played high school football and now coaches high school football, college football is really what I've always really enjoyed a ton. And the first time I really remember seeing it offered for like console gaming. And I thought it was really cool that you could be these different college teams. Now, in Bill Walsh's college football, it was more like a game where you could be different, like specific yeared teams. In other words, these were years when a team won probably like a national championship. And so you could be like the 1980 Nebraska Cornhuskers, or you could be the 1987 Miami Hurricanes, and many other teams. I want to say there was a late 60s or maybe early 70s USC team on there. I'll be perfectly honest, some of those teams didn't really interest me very much, but I still just enjoyed the opportunity to play college football. And of course, this was made by Electronic Arts, and the game was certainly trying to set itself apart from being, just another game kind of like John Madden. The playbook was a little bit different, and it had more of a kind of a college feel to it, I think, personally. And I played this game a lot. This is actually one of the games I purchased probably myself because I wanted to play it. My brother is really the one that got the Sega Genesis in my household because he wanted a system that his brother couldn't take and play. And I didn't really have a big interest in Sega, so that's why we ended up getting a Genesis. But he was the one who played more of it than I did. But everyone was telling me about this college football game, and so I picked it up for the Genesis myself and played this for a time. So definitely can remember being some all-star teams there. Okay, I mentioned before that I am an NHL fan, and actually Chris credit again on this one. Chris did a fantastic video on NHL 94, and that's really where I kind of learned about Electronic Arts' foray into NHL hockey, really. And this really was its first game that it had, NHL hockey. And the cool thing for myself for this game is, as a person who's from Minnesota and was definitely a fan of the Minnesota North Stars. This game has the Minnesota North Stars in it, which that's pretty cool to me. I can actually be my beloved North Stars in this game. And while the action is it was certainly a work in progress. It certainly was a sign of things to come. And of course, 2 iterations later, it'd be the legendary NHL '94. Unfortunately, my North Stars moved away to Dallas in the meantime, and so they were no longer the Minnesota North Stars. They were instead the Dallas Stars. But still, this was I remember picking this up after seeing his show, or his video, and that kind of inspired me to go out and find it for myself. And I'll admit, I enjoy the opportunity to be my former favorite team. It'll always be near my heart. Okay, this is one of the games I used to have that we actually had growing up, and this is IMG International Tennis, another EA game. And I told you on the previous shows that I was the boys tennis, or I still am the boys tennis coach, although it doesn't look like we'll have a season this year, but that's a story for a different day. But anyways, my family really enjoys playing tennis. My mom, my dad played a lot of tennis, and they kind of got us into it. And by us, I mean my brother and myself. And my brother was a huge diehard tennis. In fact, he was more diehard for tennis than I was. Tennis was really his only sport, and he pretty much played it almost year round. Where I had other sports and other things I was doing. And so we purchased this game because we wanted to have a fun competitive tennis game. And this one featured, of course, pros that were a part of IMG. And while it doesn't have too many big names in it, maybe the only name that I would think that anyone would have heard of, that unless you're like a big-time tennis aficionado, would be like Ivan Lendl's in it. Rocket Rod Laver is a classic tennis player that's in it. Maybe Bjorn Borg, he'd be another one. But there was a lot of, I guess you'd say, non-marquee tennis players that, if you'd watch enough, of the major events, whether it be Wimbledon, Australian Open, the French Open, you probably would have seen or heard about some of these guys. And so this was a game that my brother and I played quite a bit. The action's pretty fast. You could play one of the cool things is you could play like a tournament. So basically have like your own mid-major, your own major like tournament, and the points were pretty competitive. And my brother and I, who were taking lessons and really turning ourselves into true tennis players, this game was one where it was a way to kind of have fun, but still trying to use the same strategies that we used on the court. And I know that may seem strange to say that we took it that seriously, but we kind of did. It was kind of the mental toughness of it and all that kind of thing. And we had a lot of fun with it, even though the game itself is probably kind of blah. I mean, it's nothing really exciting, but for my brother and I, this was definitely one of our go-to games when we were in our high school years. It was a game we played quite a bit. Okay. Next, I have Sonic the Hedgehog, and believe it or not, I certainly remember when this game was introduced. I remember, of course, hearing all about it, and I remember seeing the advertisements and thinking like how beautiful and colorful the game was, and of course the action looked pretty neat to me. But I kind of realized, after seeing like other titles and whatnot, it kind of looked like the same thing. And so I didn't pick this game up until maybe 2 years ago. So it may seem kind of strange, but I kind of came into Sonic way late, and I'll talk about that in a second. But so I picked this up, I believe, I'm not joking, I picked this up from GameStop of all places, maybe a year ago. And it's definitely a fun one, and I totally understand the appeal of the game. it's certainly, to me, I think in some ways, I don't know. I guess if you're not looking to kind of mess around, kind of like you did with, I don't know, I guess I find it a little less strategy than maybe some of the things you do in like Super Mario Brothers, which is really kind of like the rough kind of in terms of like its stature equivalent. On the opposite side, I know some people might disagree with me on that, but I guess for myself, I kind of felt like it was kind of a one-trick pony. And while it was fun, it really just, you kind of just did the same thing. And even if it, over and over again, but, you probably could argue that about just about any video game really. But I picked this up a couple years ago. Somebody told me that it was rare because it doesn't say not for resale on it. But I don't know. So that's my loose card of a Sonic. I'm not even going to show that. You're going to wonder what I said. So I mentioned the local game store that I live at in Mawson. This is Games for Us. I picked this up. And so not that you really care too much, but the game store in town used to have two branches, one here and another in a community a little south of here called Richland Center. And so when they consolidated from two stores to one store, they were bringing all this stock over, things that they had from the other store. And so a lot of it was just kind of packed up in boxes. And I just kind of happened to be there as the stuff was coming in. And I was trying to get myself, I just kind of watched Chris's channel. And I remember him showing, I think the name of the episode was, Are My Genesis Games in a Strange? So I became very interested in wanting to collect some of those older Genesis games. And they said, oh, we got it. I said, do you have any Sega Genesis games? I'm like, sure. And they're in this box. And they weren't really sure, like what it was because they hadn't inventoried anything yet. So I guess you could say I got my first pick through this big box of games. And I was pretty much looking for any title that I didn't hear, that I'd never heard of. And I was just curious about it. And I was going to give it a shot because I thought it would be interesting. And this was one of the games I picked out of the box, and it is Cyberball. And I can say point blank, this is an absolutely terrible game. It's robots playing football. I realized that this game I think it was on another system at some point. I think this is a port from another system or an arcade game. But either way, it's not good football, and I don't know. I don't think it's all that fun. The kickoff thing is really strange. The fact that robots can get wrecked. I mean, I realize that those are certain elements that you find like in Mutant League football, but Mutant League football was at least charming, whereas Cyberball is really boring to me. And so this game really disappointed, but I guess if there's any silver lining is the fact that the game is actually pretty rare. You don't find it too much. And that's really about the only notable thing to say about it is it's still one of my more rare games. It's not worth a lot of money because probably the fact that it's not that fun of a game, but it is not a very common title, I guess. So, and it's in reasonable shape. So I guess that's okay too. Okay, next game, I also picked this one up out of the box, and I remember Chris's reaction when he saw it. He goes, oh, cool, man, Outrun. And he said that one's a hard one to find. And at the time, I had no idea whether that would be difficult to find or not. But I do remember this game. Outrun was, of course, a signature title racing game. I remember seeing this at arcades quite a bit. It was the game where you drive the Ferrari around. And I was not, like I said, I was not a big racing fan, but I knew that this one was an arcade port, and I kind of felt that it would be a little more accessible to me. So it was definitely a game that I knew I'd probably enjoy, and I thought it'd be a good title. And again, mine's in reasonable shape. Unfortunately, it didn't have the box, but not a bad pickup out of that box of games. Okay, next, this one's kind of beat to hell, and this is a Cool Spot, which of course is the 7-Up spot, which I showed that game for the Nintendo. And Cool Spot, I wouldn't say it picks up where the other one leaves off. It's a completely different game. The NES game is a puzzle game. Like I said, it's kind of like Chinese checkers. Cool Spot is a platformer with kind of these. It's almost kind of like, I guess the best way I describe it, even though it's not nearly as smooth as Donkey Kong Country is, it's kind of like that. It's kind of this kind of odd platformer, and you're trying to get at these different keys, and you're kind of like, again, it's playing heavily on like your size, the fact that you're a pretty small figure off a soda can, and you're kind of walking through this full-size world, and it's okay. It's not too bad of a game. I just played it last week. My copy is not in real great shape. I picked this up again at Games for Us. It was not sitting in some crusty box. It just happened to be what their title was, and Yvette, the nice co-owner of the shop, she took pity on the fact that it was in not so great shape, and so I got it for a reduced price, which I was appreciative of. But I really just wanted to play the game more than anything, and it's not too bad. I definitely would play it again. So I would say I would enjoy this one more than the NES one. Okay, next up, another game that's might make people cringe. This is Contra Hardcore, and unfortunately my copy is a little hardcore. No pun intended. Actually, pun intended. My copy of Contra Hardcore, like you can tell, is seen better days. I picked this up. A friend of mine actually picked it up for me at Gaming Generations in La Crosse, and he told me they had Contra Hardcore, and I'd heard nothing but good things about Contra Hardcore. One, that it's a pretty damn tough game, but I enjoyed like Contra, and even its 16-bit iterations like Contra 3 Alien Wars for Super Nintendo, and I just wanted to get Contra Hardcore. Unfortunately, I'm talking to my friend over the phone as he's telling me, he kind of told me it was kind of beat up, and of course, he kind of just took a picture, and the picture really was just like that. And while that certainly isn't promising, of course, seeing that it's all chewed up here probably would have made me not do it. They wanted $40 for it. I said 25, and the guy said deal. And so for $25, I got Contra Hardcore. I've had more opportunities to get this game in much better shape, and even in box. And I don't know, since I already have it, I'm kind of conflicted. I'd like to get a better copy than what I have, but I guess for myself, if I'd really just want to play it, I already have it. So I don't know. It's one of those ones where maybe someday I'll try to swap it. I'll try to get a better copy than this one. But in the meantime, hey, I can still play Contra Hardcore. That's all that matters, right? Okay, so there's that. Next, I have The Revenge of Shinobi. Shinobi was a game I certainly remember seeing a lot as a kid when anyone would ever talk about anything to do with Sega. It was really kind of a signature game. I remember seeing it a lot in the arcades as well. And as I began to learn more about Shinobi in the series, I began to be more interested in it. I remember, for whatever reason, the early 90s was like a ninja phase for like the whole country. Anything that was cool was somehow ninja related. Everything from motorcycles to seemingly almost any show seemed to want to throw a ninja angle to it, and Shinobi kind of just fit and filled that mix as well. And it's an okay game. I wouldn't say I like it as much as, let's say, Ninja Gaiden, but it's not a bad game. I realize those are in different systems, but I would say for whatever reason I just enjoy Ninja Gaiden more. But it's a cool one, and I will admit, I have picked up the trilogy. Okay, so next, I guess completely fitting that I mentioned that. This is Shinobi 3, the return of the Ninja Master. And I picked this one up, I remember specifically after watching Chris's show. It just looked interesting and fascinating enough to me that it was a game that I wanted to get. And it really wasn't that tough to get a hold of. I think I want to say I got this at Games for Us here in Boston. And it's an okay copy. Label's a little beat up, but overall it's in better shape than like Cool Spot. And, it achieved the goal of me getting the Shinobi game that, like I said, it looked pretty fun to me. And it's a little bit more of a later game, not too much, but a little bit, because it's got the red tag, as opposed to the more cooler looking old school grid. Here's Chakan. Now, this game I thought was pretty interesting myself, even though I know a lot of people kind of give it a lot of crap, as you're kind of like this undead sort of like ninja or samurai kind of character. I don't know. It's kind of dark imagery, I know, but I thought the concept was cool, and I thought some of the scenes that I saw with it, even though the character himself, I think, moves kind of stiff, I thought it looked interesting enough to me for me to pick it up. And I only paid like $20 for it. It's probably maybe too much, but it's at least in a more or less, at least as far as the cart goes, it's in perfect shape. So I was willing to pay that. So not a bad game. Okay, next one. This one did come from a box from the Games for Us. This is Dragon's Revenge, which is a Tengen game. And of course, it is a pinball game. And as a person who owns a pinball machine, and I kind of mentioned this in my NES one when I was talking about high speed and pinbot, I certainly love, at least I've enjoyed playing video game pinball as well. And I've always been kind of amazed at how well they grasp the physics of it, especially when you consider, especially in the cartridge era. I've always been impressed at like how much they were able to pack in there that were like some of the subtle details of some of these machines. And I realized that Dragon's Revenge, at least to my understanding, I don't believe it actually exists as a physical machine. I always thought I heard good stuff about this one, and of course Dragon's Fury, which I've not yet picked up, but I thought it was pretty cool. I know it was a Crew Ball, I think, which is the Motley Crue one. I've seen good stuff about that too, but I haven't been able to find that one yet. Okay, here is another game that Chris also profiled. This is E-Swat. Okay, City Under Siege, kind of like a RoboCop kind of thing. And again, a game you probably maybe don't hear that much about, but a game that I think actually holds up a lot better than, a game that probably deserves more attention and love than it gets, because it wasn't a high-profile title. And I think also the fact that Sega Genesis, at least in the classic sense, gets a lot more credit for some of the shooters that it had, since it had a greater proportion of shooting games, that this one kind of gets lost in the shuffle even as a platformer. And I don't know, Chris kind of sold me on the idea to pick this one up, and I was able to pick up this copy from I think it was called a website called DK Oldies, although I've said I had some issues with that company. And I'll just say I wouldn't buy from them again. But this game they treated me okay on. But that's E-Swat. Okay, I guess we'll go close to me. So I mentioned before how I had kind of a backwards introduction to Sonic. And that's because my introduction to Sonic was my brother's pickup of Sonic and Knuckles. So that was the first Sonic game that came into my household as a kid. And it wasn't even my game, it was my brother's game. And so I remember playing Sonic and Knuckles first. And I mean, it's pretty similar to just about any other game. And of course, you know, the feature is always the ability to kind of add some of those features to the other Sonic titles, which I thought was kind of a clever idea. You know, you didn't really get that chance with, you didn't really get that opportunity with like Nintendo titles usually to try, you know, and combine games like you could with this one. And since my brother didn't purchase the Sega Genesis, I believe, until probably 1992, pretty late in its run. That's why we ended up with Sonic and Knuckles. And so, as his brother, and who didn't have the system in my room because it was in my brother's room, I tried my best to help him. I ended up picking up another game, which I don't want to spoil it, but actually I will right now, since I can see it. So I remember picking up for my brother Sonic Spinball, which of course you could add Knuckles to it by using him in the cart. And you know, this was another one we played. In fact, that was the first video game pinball I ever played too, was Sonic Spinball. And it's not anything I think to really get excited about now, but at the time it just seemed cool that you could stack games like that and have that character, even though they weren't originally intended for it. I just thought that was clever. And my brother certainly appreciated the opportunity to expand a game he already had, so it fed into a lot of different things. So I remember picking this up. I bought this from a kid at the high school where I went in Elk River. I think I gave the kid $15 for 2 games, and unfortunately I lost the other game, which was Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which I think is actually a pretty expensive game. And I have no idea where the hell that game went. Still looking for that one, but I guess luckily or unluckily, I still had Sonic Spinball. So there's that. Okay. Changing directions here. So Chris is also going to cringe on this one if he's watching. Thunder Force 3. Chris really is the one that introduced me to a lot of shooters. I really hadn't spent much time with the genre other than, of course, Gradius. That was really my jam. Gradius and Gradius 3 for the Super Nintendo. And so when I started watching Chris's show, he was telling me about Thunder Force 2, and then he showed us later Thunder Force 3, and I saw these games and was just blown away. The Technosoft, and then eventually I picked up, I remember getting on my Nintendo Switch Lightning Force, which of course is like, really, I think it's Thunder Force 4. If I got that right, you can tell me in the comments if I got it wrong. I'm sorry, it's not intentional. But it's a very fun game. It's also very challenging and frustrating. But the graphics are great. The controls are tight. And my copy, unfortunately, has seen better days. And to me, the worst part about it is where the damage is on the label, because it's a really cool looking label when it's all complete. And my scratch is like at the best part. So it's like they scratched out the best part and that just sucks. I want to say I picked this up. I think I picked this up on off of Amazon somewhere, and I don't want to say, I don't think I paid much more than $25, but it still hurts to see it in that kind of beat up condition. But I guess, condition aside, I could still play the game, and that matters more to me than the label. But yeah, it's not the prettiest one in the world for sure. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, next one is a game I actually always was interested in, enchanted by, and that is ECCO the Dolphin. I picked this up at Gaming Generations in Lacrosse for, I think, $6 or $7, and it's in pretty much perfect shape. When I cleaned it up, it looks like it's brand new. I've played this a couple times. I love the physics on this game, and I remember, seeing this game as a kid and thinking, "Wow, that's really neat." A Dolphin protagonist where it seemed, to me, it didn't make I don't know how I want to say this. It seemed to me like I don't know, I guess I felt like it was I don't know, I want to say honest portrayal of what a dolphin is, but I guess for myself, I felt like, it didn't feel like you were something that you weren't. I don't know. I'm not really communicating this very effectively, but I would just say this. I thought the game was neat because I just felt it was very unique. And so it was definitely a game I wanted to pick up. And I'm glad I did, although the in-the-box copies are pretty simple to get a hold of, and for whatever reason, I've not been able to find one, at least a decent one. But this is a cool game. I played it a couple times and had a lot of fun with it. Okay, next. Oh, I won't show that. I'm sorry for saying stuff like that. There's reasons. Trust me. This is another game actually Chris introduced me to. It's another side-scrolling shooter. This is Steel Empire, in kind of an alternate universe, kind of set, I guess, what we would have maybe thought the world was going to be like. Had like zeppelins or blimps or kind of steampunkish kind of stuff took over, and it has kind of this old-timey steampunk style to it, and I think that makes it kind of cool and fun. And the game's actually, I don't know, kind of a little bit slower paced, at least I think so. And I've had some good times with this one, but I don't know. I just like the art style. I like the fact that it's not just another space shooter, but it's also not just another World War II one. It's kind of an alternate universe a little bit, but in a good way. For whatever reason, I always kind of like stuff like that. This is MERCS. Sega's answer to kind of almost like a heavy barrel kind of game, and this game's kind of a funny one to play. You have kind of I don't want to say isometric. That's probably not the right word. So you kind of have this strange top-down view, and you're working your way through. It kind of still like some Contra stages too, and I don't know. This was kind of a fun fun run and gun. Although it definitely has its frustrating moments too, but it's been a good one. I think I picked this one up at I want to say I picked this one up at Gaming Generations in Lacrosse, and it wasn't that expensive. It was only like $13, but it's not a bad copy. It's got actually it's in not bad shape. Not too bad. Okay. Next one, and this is actually, there you go, Thunder Force 2, right there. This was the game that Chris showed us on his channel. showing you the unique top-down part, which is kind of unique. I kind of enjoyed the challenge of it. I enjoyed hearing the voice come over and tell me about my weapon upgrades and whatnot. And then I like how then it goes to being a side scroller, and definitely got me interested more into the shooting genre. And that's kind of where it started from there. And then I kind of became, I guess you'd say, I jumped in with both feet, as we'll see. Maybe not as much today, but as we'll see when I look at the complete in box games, probably on another day. But Thunder Force 2 is a real fun one, and my copy of this one is much better than my Thunder Force 3 game. And yeah, another awesome Technosoft game. Okay. Golden Axe 2. So there's your epic cover art there. Definitely definitely fantasy kind of fun. I know Chris really kind of had some fun with some streams of Golden Axe, and I can totally understand why he had so much fun playing Golden Axe as a kid. And I do have that one also, but I had a chance to get the sequel, which I heard is okay. I heard it's it's a decent game, but Golden Axe is probably a little better, and so I picked that one up. Admittedly, I don't have. I've only played this like one time, and I don't really remember it making much of an impression on me, unfortunately. So it was definitely a title I remember seeing on occasion at like the arcades or people talking to me about it. But it was a game that I guess you kind of figure it's a fantasy genre, and you really didn't. I guess maybe I felt I didn't really need to know all the details, so to speak. Okay, next. And this is the other game that Chris definitely, and probably I would argue maybe this is my favorite Sega Genesis game, and that is Streets of Rage 2. And as you can see, unfortunately, my copy is not in the best shape. But this game's absolutely freaking awesome. This is the game that I will pull out and play if I'm pissed off. This is the game I'll take when, I just want to have fun, and it's fun every single time. And it's to me, it's really the best all around beat 'em up. I have Final Fight. I have played, Renegade and Double Dragon and those, but to me, Streets of Rage is just the right balance. I love the characters. Yeah, some of them are maybe in poor taste in terms of the fact that they like to pick on fat people in it. But I guess that was just the nature of the day, maybe. I don't know if that's to be excused or not. But either way, it's a lot of fun. And the music by Yuzo Koshiro is fan-freaking-tastic. And I'll be honest with you, this is 100% the reason why I pre-ordered Streets of Rage 4 from Limited Run. And I can't wait to play that game as soon as I get it. But in the meantime, and probably forever even beyond that, Streets of Rage 2 will definitely be probably one of my top 3 games I play on probably for all time. I love that game. Thanks a lot, Chris, for showing it to me. Okay, next, go over here. Altered Beast. Altered Beast. This was the other, I guess I could say, classic Sega Genesis title that I remember seeing a lot as a kid. It was definitely, it was a pack-in game for a time with the Genesis. And I remember seeing this game in the arcades, the transformations that you would be. Admittedly, once I finally played it, while it's a good game and all that, I've always found myself kind of frustrated with it. It's to me, it's very stiff, and even though I think the graphics are pretty awesome, and I think the story and or I guess you'd say kind of the subject matter is really vibrant and distinctive. I just kind of feel like the character should be better for whatever reason, and I don't know if I'm alone on that or not, but I don't know. I just think that it could have been a better game, and I don't know. Some of you might think that's sacrilege for me to take a shot at a classic Sega Genesis title like Altered Beast is, but I don't know. Comparing this to like, and I realize I'm a little bit of comparing apples and oranges. When I think about what they were able to do with Streets of Rage 2, and then I play Altered Beast, I mean, man, to me, there's like no difference. The controllability and the mobility of the characters of the Streets of Rage characters are just so much better. And to me, I think Altered Beast could have been that. I think it should have been that. And it's a shame it wasn't. But maybe my standards are maybe Streets of Rage made me biased towards it, but I don't know. I would definitely say the visuals live up to it. I'd say the sound even kind of lives up to it because it's classic Sega Genesis. But I don't know. I guess I was left wanting more, believe it or not. So maybe I'm a snob and I didn't realize it. So next, another awesome game, and I will not. Since you guys know that I'm a hockey fan, I was very proud to pick up. And again, this was a game that was also mentioned in Chris's NHL 94 video, which I will post a link to once I'm done with this stream, is Mutant League Hockey, which uses the NHL 94, I guess you'd say physics engine or playing engine, where you're a variety of these different Mutant League hockey teams. And this game is just absolutely hysterical. In fact, from the weird coaches' discussions about players, how they're going to kill the team and all this stuff if they don't perform better. Even if you're winning, they threaten to kill your team, which is always funny. I don't know. It's a hysterical game to play. And of course, you can either play hockey or literally just try to kill all of your opponents, which can work just as well. And I don't know. I just think it's a hysterical game. I know it's worth a decent amount of money. I'm glad I bought it when I did because I do know that it's gone up. And I also profiled this. I probably have not told you I'm a hockey blogger. And I did a tournament on the best hockey video games of all time, and Mutant League was in its own category. And I think if more people had a chance to play it, they would probably put it in higher respect than it is because, one, using the NHL 94 engine, it's got the hockey, at least like, the one-timer and things like that, which are just awesome things to have. But the hack and slash stuff certainly gives it that arcade-ish element that can be fun in its own right. And I don't know. I've enjoyed Mutant League Hockey quite a bit. Okay, here's kind of an unusual one. I've only played this once. I got this at Games for Us, and it was in that box when they were making that store transition. And again, I looked at it, thought that's weird, and it just says Battle Squadron, and I not really being able to tell too much just by looking at a cartridge that just has text on it. Mostly, I didn't really know what I was getting, but it's kind of a shooter. It's not that great of a shooter, but it's not one you see very often. And Electronic Arts tried their hand in a lot of different things. Well, they're probably mostly known as a sports game company. They tried other things, and this was one of their attempts to branch out a little bit. And it's an okay game, but it's kind of slow, and I would say the ship handle is very clunky. So it's probably one of the poorer performing shooters because that's because, of course, there were so many really awesome ones for the system. So it's not real great for what it's supposed to be, but it's definitely not one you see too often. So it's more of a better game as a collecting game than playing game. Okay, I picked up Sonic 2. Chris, they were talking about. You can see the not for resale tag on this one. Chris had talked about saying how he enjoyed the different Sonic games, and again, I was not much of a connoisseur because I told you I came into it pretty late, and to me, one Sonic game was pretty much the same, and I know that's really wrong. Some people are screaming at the computer right now, but to me, it looked the same, and I guess I wasn't that. I wasn't that particular. So I picked this one up. I think it was dirt cheap. I bet you I spent $8 on it, and I want to say I bought it from GameStop too. So yeah, you can say I can go to hell for that one too. But anyways, that's Sonic 2. Another game though I did pick from Games for Us here in Boston was this, and that is Columns, which is a classic match 3 puzzle game for the Sega Genesis. I am not very good at this game at all. And admittedly, I purchased this game with the hope to kind of intrigue my wife to maybe play some Sega Genesis. My wife is more of a puzzle gamer than anything like a platformer, and definitely not shooters or RPGs or anything like that, or junior RPGs or anything. But she does like puzzle games, and I knew she liked a lot of games that were like match 3. So I thought, hey, I heard about this game Columns, and I found it for pretty cheap. I think I bought this for $10 or $12 or $11 at Games for Us when I pulled it out of that bin. And again, it's in not bad shape, all things considered. But I know the game's not worth a lot of money. But I do know it's a classic of the early Genesis days. And I know it has its origins, I believe, back to the Sega Master System. So I picked it up. My wife never played it, unfortunately, even though I tried very hard to get her to give it a shot. But alas, she didn't. But there's still time. Okay. Now, this was the best game that I picked up out of that box of the Sega games that were coming in when they're doing the store relocation, and that is Alisia Dragoon. And this game is really unique. Kind of as a platformer shooter is the best way to describe it. So you're a female protagonist, which again is kind of unusual. Of course, a scantily clad female protagonist. And you have these different dragons that you have with you that have differing abilities. And the dragons, some are good at being a little more powerful and mixing it up at close range. Others are good at maybe providing maybe a little more close-in protection or protection from like rear attacks and things like that. And you have to kind of manage the dragons because the dragons themselves are living creatures, so they can get killed. And once they get killed, then you could be without a very useful helper in your quest through the levels. And the levels are kind of relentless. I'll admit I was not very good at this game. A friend of mine picked it up for like the first time and got a lot farther than I did. So I'm certainly a novice at Alisia Dragoon, but it's a very intriguing game. I would say it was a big surprise to me because I remember when I mentioned this to the game shop owner, he's like, yeah, I saw that in there. He goes, I was hoping no one would pick it up. And I know shop owners say stuff like that, but he said he had heard good things about it. And of course, I've kind of come to learn that it's kind of a coveted title. You don't see too many of them around anymore. Unfortunately, I didn't get it in the box. And also mine has a little bit of scuffing, but I probably could work on this a little more to clean up what is left of what would have been an old label, but otherwise it's in great shape. And it's a fun game too. Another game I picked up from that box that was also kind of I guess a tough one was this one is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the Hyperstone Heist. And this one's another one that's kind of rare, although unfortunately this one's a little bit beat up. But again, it's pretty much a lot like I believe just like the arcade game, like Turtles in Time, except for it has a slightly kind of different storyline to it. And so it has that arcade port-like feel. And I don't know about you, while people were playing Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat and Terminator 2 in the arcades when I was roughly like in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. To me, the game that I enjoyed playing the most in the arcades, and NBA Jam, can't forget that, was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That game, playing cooperatively with your friends, to me was the best. And these 16-bit ports of it, whether Turtles in Time or Hyperstone Heist, are just fantastic in how they capture that arcade feel. And Genesis especially was really good at that. And I totally understand why this is a game people want to get, because playing with your friends is just the best thing. And there's nothing like playing an arcade in your home, especially if it's a near arcade experience like that. And I'm glad I picked this one up. Okay, and my last loose game, and then we're gonna, I guess, call it a night, is this Golden Axe. And this was the game Chris streamed a couple times. I know for Chris this was, I don't know, the best way to describe it was like comfort food, and I can totally understand why. I'm not very real good in the game. The viewpoint of Golden Axe, if you've never seen it, if you played Battletoads, it's kind of like that. It's like Battletoads, but with people with weapons. And I guess I hope I didn't ruin Golden Axe for anybody by saying that. But I had a lot of, I totally can see the appeal to it. I just am not real great in this game, and I've Chris is it's fairly short by video game standards, and I don't think it's really that difficult to beat it. I know I beat it fairly soon after I purchased it. And if I had a friend along, of course you could play against each other, which was always adding to like the replay value. But I definitely can see why people have such fond memories of it. And again, it was a game that I probably, I'd heard about, seen a little bit, but I never probably would have played if it hadn't been for discovering Chris's channel. So that's another one where, again, thanks a lot. Giving me a lot of fun. So that's it for my loose Sega Genesis carts. Maybe, I don't know, maybe tomorrow. It kind of depends on how I feel. Maybe I'll do another stream tomorrow of my inbox Genesis titles, which might be a little more impressive to you, maybe not. I don't know. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this stream. If you have any comments, please leave them. Give me those comments at either @CreaseAndAssist on Twitter or in the comments section below. So anyways, that's it for me. We'll see you next time.